Item 4 is members' questions. Can I ask that members who wish to ask supplementary questions stand up and state supplementary, and also that any supplementary questions are put forward clearly and briefly. Councillor Osborne.
Question number 1 to the Leader, please.
Mr. Mayor, I thank Councillor Osborne for his question, and as it says, the arrangements under discussions between us and Richmond should not result in any significant changes in the way we make capital investment decisions. But what will in fact be helpful in the future, I'm sure, as our revenue savings increase or the pressure on our revenues reduce, we should have greater flexibility in investments where appropriate.
Can the Leader tell us, did he have any conversations at all with any other local authorities about joint arrangements of the type that we now are about to have with Richmond, progressing with them, or has he not talked to any other councils at all? I know that, excluding Kingston, of course.
Thank Councillor Osborne for his supplementary. As is often the case, I go to various gatherings where there are leaders of other local authorities, and there are conversations about who is in the mood to share a greater number of services. I have looked at number of those who were interested in it. I've had individual conversations, but the one that was the most fruitful and most productive conversation was with Richmond.
Second supplementary, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the Leader slightly share my concern with the opposition Leader's question that he seems to display a worrying lack of grasp over the fact that we share many different services already with London boroughs? You know, there are a number of services that are very important that we're already sharing, and he seems to have completely glossed over the fact that every day we're looking at opportunities and options for different services, different collaborations, different knowledge sharing, and it just seems that he's completely forgotten about all of this. Do you think it's a lack of grasp of what we're up to as a council?
Thank Councillor Cuff for his supplementary. I suspect it may be a bit of that and a bit of the other, as it were. The other might actually be that the opposition wishes that we were actually in partnership with somebody else, as indeed the Deputy Leader of Opposition suggested it was Merton that we should be in relationship with, not Richmond, only on the grounds that we shared a common GLA member. Nice as he is, I don't think that is the basis of a deeper relationship, frankly. But I think Councillor Cuff is also right to draw attention to what we are doing elsewhere. We are on the pension side. We are jointly providing pension services to Camden as well as Merton. In case of some of the property procurement, we did that actual procurement with Lambeth to the net advantage of both of those authorities. And oddly enough, even on the library procurement, we did start with the process of jointly procuring that contract with Croydon. And whilst it didn't help Croydon out very much, but it did mean that actual cost of procurement was much lower. There are many, many other ways in which the Council has cooperated with other local authorities to the net advantage of both councils to reduce costs, and that has continued. This is just simply a bigger scale joint service arrangement.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne. Good.
Question number 2 to the Leader, please.
I thank Councillor Osborne for his question. As the answer says, the Falcon Park facility will indeed, the Battersea Sports Centre facility will indeed remain open until the Falcon Park facility is available for use. I think two things I'd like to sort of, I would hope from Councillor Osborne. Let's see whether I'm hoping, hopefully. I hope he'll join me in welcoming the substantial investment in the Latchmere area that the Falcon Park facility represents. And I hope he pledges his support for the huge investment in the York Road Winstanley estates for more and better homes for people of Battersea.
Supplementary.
I do indeed welcome this investment in local sport, but let me ask, Can the council leader also reassure me that the Battersea Sports Centre will remain open until the new leisure centre at York Gardens opens? And will he commit to bring forward plans to this effect to the Community Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee on February the 10th?
I thank Councillor Osborne for his supplementary. I'm surprised that he didn't want to take the opportunity of using his supplementary to pledge his support for the regeneration of 2 major estates, which will provide enormous number of new homes to the existing residents, will provide new homes of different tenures across the piece. In fact, it will transform the area, and I would have thought that he would have been interested in supporting transformation of this key part of Battersea constituency. Clearly he's not.
Councillor Dawson. Councillor Dawson.
Supplementary question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, I welcome very much the reassurances that Councillor Govindia has said, as I'm sure they'll be welcomed in the area, which is in great contrast to the misinformation and half-truths that have been peddled by Battersea Labour Party. And in fact, does he agree that the aspirations programme of Wandsworth Conservatives is a real and tangible commitment to the residents of Winstanley and York Road estates, and which stands in stark contrast to the attitude of the party opposite? And in fact, also, would you just like to mention, of course, the new facilities at Keys House?
Thank Councillor Dawson for his supplementary. And Councillor Dawson's quite right to end his question drawing attention to the facilities at Keys House, which are truly superb. For those members who have not been to it, I think they ought to go and see them. They have absolutely changed the face of that facility in Battersea. Keys House has been a feature of Battersea for very many years, but never has it looked so welcoming to the young people of Battersea as now. But of course there is similar investment at St John Bosco, where facilities will be available not only for the school but the community as well, which is where we hope that more and more people from Battersea will go. I think Councillor Dawson's point, supplementary raises, in a sense, the obvious point that the opposition has been fair weather friend on the York Road Winstanley regeneration. They welcomed it at the start because obviously they would, wouldn't they? When the going has got slightly tricky and the elections are looming, they have peeled away because of a 5-month window in which they want to garner an advantage. I have to say that the opposition ought to be careful about showing to local residents that all they're interested in is for a short-term electoral advantage rather than the long-term transformational advantages that this council has put forward in their way.
Mr. Mayor, on a point of order, I want to move the adjournment of the council in protest at the outrageous nature of that answer. I think I have fairly good grounds, given what was said. Mr. Mayor,
do you have a seconder? Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, at no point at all have the opposition members, and particularly the 3 ward members, Councillor Speck, Councillor Hogg and I, done anything other than support the regeneration of that estate, a fact that Councillor Govindia knows well. We were promised by the Chief Executive and the leader...
Yes, sir.
Belton may not be aware of, at the committee, when it came to the vote, the councillors actually abstained on that. I don't know whether that is support or not.
That is a complete irrelevance, as I will demonstrate if only the council lets me finish. Let me explain. From the beginning, the Chief Executive and the leader promised full consultation with the 3 said members. And indeed, to give them the justice, when I complained after a housing committee maybe a year and a half ago and said I was not happy with the level of the consultation, the Chief Executive called us and the senior officers together and we talked through the matter again. And the consultation has worked at times. But after Christmas, not before, after Christmas, bundled into the regeneration was the closure of the Battersea Sports Centre. It was bundled in as a package. No consultation whatsoever. Anyone can do that trick. Are you in favour of X, Y and Z, and we'll bundle in something that you're going to be opposed to, leaving us in a very difficult position and something you did nothing to help us avoid. Indeed, the Deputy Leader has done all in his power to ramp up a situation where we are desperately trying to work together and make something function for the good of Latchmere. And indeed, I think you'd have to confess, if you were objective for a moment, we've had some little success. So, since Christmas, we have had a concession of kinds that instead of being closed the sports centre when it's convenient for the building programme, it won't be closed until a football field has been finished. So we've had some movement. We're quite prepared to discuss other movement because we, unsurprisingly, how many other ward councillors act like this? We're interested in the concerns and interests of our constituents, all our constituents, including those who use the sports centre. You have bundled them together. Now, in the programme, again, unbeknown to us, who were going to be completely consulted before Christmas, didn't even know there was going to be a football field or a sports centre being put on the estate. It was never mentioned, completely out of the blue for all of us, Councillor Speck, Councillor Hogg, myself, many of us as involved with our ward as any councillors in this borough. And then suddenly, out of the blue, a plan for a swimming pool arrives. Now, that's really good. I'm a little bit unbelievable, not quite sure where the money's come from, but we knew nothing about it until it was all bundled in this one package. Mr. Mayor, I take extreme objection to the Deputy Leader's letter. I've talked about this to the leader, and we both expressed to each other in a nearby local place that we were both hurt by how the process had worked out, both that's the leader and I. And I've tried to cool it down. But today, in his questions, what's he doing except ramping it up again? He is trying to prevent good terms. We are trying to make sure they work. And I don't think that's very good sign from a leader trying to lead the whole of the council on this very important project. I hope we'll all let off steam, have our rant, and then let's get back to working collectively on this very important issue, ensuring that the sports facilities are available in the same way as the regeneration goes ahead. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gavindio, would you wish to respond?
Well, Mr. Mayor, this is not unusual for Councillor Belton to rise on what I think is often an indulgence. But let me just turn to the conversations that he and I certainly have had. Some of my colleagues will probably remind me afterwards that I sit in hostelry with Councillor Belton too often, too long. And I suspect I'll have to say I am suitably chastised, and we'll have to learn from this. Mr. Mayor, Councillor Belton ends his speech on the right note, that this is a major thing for Battersea and for the council, and more importantly, for the residents of York Road Winstanley Estate. It is not in our individual interest around here to do anything other than to move forward this regeneration proposals. I only wish that when it came to the Housing Committee that the device of voting on a recommendation on a clause-by-clause basis, so that you vote against everything you agree with and vote against what you don't agree with, was taken, because that would have made a clear indication of faith in the regeneration and upset at the particular proposals regarding Battersea Sports Centre. And I recognize that we are not very far from election, less than 100 days from polling day. Passions will run high and people will want to make shortcuts in their pledges and commitments for a short-term advantage. I hope that after this period is over, we can actually concentrate on delivering the transformation on York Road Winstanley as promised. And I think we will do so, I think.
We have, we do have an adjournment motion before us that the Council adjourns for a period of 30 seconds to draw attention to the Leader's answer to question 2. You want to... Thank you very much indeed. All in favour of the motion? And those against?
Question 3 to the Leader.
I thank Councillor Cuff for his question. I think in short the answer is lots, really. There have been lots and lots of new housing delivered as a result of some of the investment decisions we made, but more importantly as a result of our relook at our housing policy for the future. The chief lessons of that policy, of course, is that we want to put at the heart of our housing assessment and housing delivery all the residents of this borough, the needs of all the residents of this borough, not just simply those for whom we have statutory duty alone. We want to actually focus on people who are locally resident, and we want to focus on people with a connection with the borough. We want to reward people who have made Wandsworth their home, and I think that is something that our residents would welcome. I think we are embarked on, and the reason why we are able to do all of this is because actually of the way in which we have managed our housing revenue account. We have managed it well. We have got headroom in it. We have got surpluses in it. We are in a far, far better position than many, many other authorities elsewhere, and that we are taking advantage of that to the net benefit of our residents.
Second supplementary, Mr. Mayor. Does the Leader share with me my concern in some of the discussions tonight, but also more widely on the capital programme, that one of the fundamental principles of our investment in our estates is that we must ensure that we minimise the disruption to our local residents when we move them. It seems that in some of the narrative tonight, that has been completely forgotten by the opposition when they're considering opposing certain elements of our regeneration. And it seems to me that this is not always the most important weighting factor in the decisions we make on our capital programme, but one that we should think about when we decide to oppose certain elements, as the opposition has done lately.
Thank Councillor Cuff for his supplement. I mean, I couldn't agree with Councillor Cuff more. I was housing management chairman many years ago when we, as a council, decanted the 3 blocks in his own ward. The blocks no longer exist, Bookham, Caterham and Sellers, and the key lesson from that and any other decants we've done before is that people don't like moving, and the less times they move, the better. I think an awful lot of our residents are not used to the idea of moving. I think there are members in this council who moved 6 times in the last 3 months or whatever, but our residents don't move that often. They haven't got that kind of understanding of what it requires to move. I also think that their other lives get disrupted. Their journey from home to work gets disrupted. Their children's journey from home to school gets disrupted. And so the fundamental promise we made in both regeneration area was that we would move people once. And that one move only, and that guaranteed of one move only, has been fundamental in delivering resident support for the scheme so far. And so to unravel that, I think would be a wrong thing to do, and that is why it is very important that we take all steps possible to deliver new units so that people can be decanted from existing homes on the estates to their new home, which will be their new permanent home.
Councillor Redden.
Mr. Mayor, can I congratulate the majority party for easing up on capital investment in housing, partly because of the government changes and the greater control we have over the assets of the council. But can I ask him, given that we're choosing to pay back debt on the account in 13 years when it could be longer, life of a house or a building, surely it could be 30 years very comfortably. And if that were the case, then we could build more. And does he therefore think, in response to his question, that the numbers here are adequate for, especially of affordable housing, in a rapidly growing population, in a rapidly growing city? These numbers wouldn't have been considered adequate 10, 20 years ago, and surely they're still not adequate given the growth of population.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know whether I should stand up and thank Councillor Bolton for his supplementary. I think Councillor Bolton makes a classic half-pint, half-full comment there. Let me just give you a sort of simple lesson on I welcome your congratulations on easing up on capital investment. And the way we have been able to ease up on capital investment is that we have capital in the first place. And the fundamental rule of capital investment is that you need to have the capital in order to invest. And so this is one of those councils that actually has the capital in the first place to invest. I was reflecting on one of the supplementaries asked by Councillor Osborne earlier, when he said that the 10 million we would save from the Richmond arrangement, could we then identify to spend it? So before you save the money, you're going to make the commitment to save it, to spend it. The idea is to take cost out of the arrangement, not put cost back in. So with that kind of grasp of economics, I can understand where Councillor Bolton comes from. But of course what the answer also says is that these are things that we would want to keep under review. And so there are some of the initiatives that we have taken, which way we may review and may invest more if it is opportune and helpful.
Question 4 to the leader, please.
I thank Councillor Critchard for her question. Let me just make 2 points, which is that in virtually any consultation that the Council puts out, there's always a whole group of people who would say that we never got the letter. I think that remains a problem across the piece, and maybe more so when dealing with some of the more hard to reach, as it were, might be residents. But one thing is sure, that Council has done all it can in the first place to reach out to them, and if there are new initiatives or new ideas that people have, then I see that FCROS did say that they would welcome new thoughts on how we could do it better. But it's got to be done in a way that it yields result, it's cost effective as well as appropriate.
Supplementary. Leader. First of all, thank you for your answer, Leader. The one thing I have noticed in this is the word satisfied, and there seems to be a bit of a touch of complacency about our dealings with the electorate that has also come through with Councillor Grimson's comments about how we're going to consult on the proposed arrangements with Richmond. I'm glad that the Council are thinking about looking at arrangements. What I would like to know is, can the leader assure us that Wandsworth Borough Council are prepared to seek advice from other boroughs and organisations about innovative ways to consult with hard-to-reach groups, even if they don't happen to, and they could be very different authorities and boroughs to those that he normally talks to?
Councillor Govindiam.
I thank Councillor Kachar for a supplement. I think the idea that this council doesn't talk to other boroughs is actually a complete canard. I don't know where it's come from, but there are people around who say that Wandsworth is insular and doesn't talk to anyone. It's actually not true, because both members and officers do. The fact that we don't do what others do is not proof that we don't talk to them. And what we don't do, we don't copy other boroughs when they're ineffective. We don't copy other boroughs when they are profligate. We don't copy other boroughs when they don't make sense. But where they do make sense, and as the answer says, if there are innovative and cost-effective ways of doing this, then of course we are ready to listen and learn.
Councillor Hampton.
I would like to ask Councillor Pritchard why she's brought this to the council chamber in the first place. To the leader. I would like to ask the leader why Councillor Pritchard has brought this to the council chamber. We discussed this at some length at FCross. We went through it very carefully. Mr. Buss, who I see is here, said that he would look at innovative ideas. What is she suggesting, may I ask the leader? That those 13,000 people are forced to give a view and opinion? I assume that people in Wandsworth, when asked their opinion, will give it yes or no. But the problem that I really have is, of course, that the Labour Party, for their 13 years of government...
Could you stick to the question, please?
Well, it is actually, Mr. Mayor, for their 13 years of government, wasted so very much of our council tax. However, she would now like to waste more of officers' time. I do not believe that it should be brought to the chamber.
Question to the leader, please.
I thank Councillor Hampton for her question. I really can't, obviously can't answer for Councillor Pritchard as to why she did it. But what I am aware of, and you're right to bring us to this, that there was a full debate at the Finance Corporate Resources Committee where an explanation was given about how the consultation was carried out, and commitment was given by the Director of Finance that if there are new and innovative areas, then he's willing to hear. I understand there has been some correspondence between Councillor Pritchard and the Council over exactly this subject. And of course, this is exactly the way in which I expect members to behave, in that they raise issues at the appropriate OAC, follow it up, but not necessarily have to grandstand at the council in order to drive home the message. The message has been driven home well and truly, both at the OSC and in the subsequent correspondence.
Mr. Mayor? Right. I'd just like to say, as far as I'm... Sorry?
Is this personal explanation?
Personal explanation. As far as I'm aware, at the council, one of the things we can do is bring items to a wider audience than they may possibly have received finance and information at a particular overview and scrutiny committee, and therefore I think that the whole way that Wandsworth consults with its residents is something that bears bringing to this full council.
The time for questions to the leader is now finished, so we move on to questions to Cabinet members. Councillor Carpenter.
Question 7 to the Cabinet member.
I thank Councillor Carpenter for his question. As the answer sets out, when reviewing this, we've got to take in mind not just the cost to the recipients of the benefit, but also the costs to the general council taxpayer as well. It's not surprising that people would object to any increase in the amount of council tax they're paying. That perhaps is shown in the election results as well. But what we've seen, I think, in the scheme that we have come up with is that it remains one of the most generous in London, probably in the top quartile. So I think it is a reasonable decision that we have come to.
Yes, indeed.
I agree with the Cabinet Member that we have a fairly generous scheme, but I think one of the problems we have is that we will be considered sort of contemptuous of our electorate if, when we go out and consult them and they say by 3 to 1 they want one thing and we say, well, forget it then, they're not going to take us seriously. So, will he take the electorate more seriously when he consults them in future, please?
I thank the Councillor. I'm afraid I might sound like Councillor Grimston in my response, which would be very worrying. But of course, a consultation is just that. We as councillors are elected to take the decisions. And if we do believe that the results of the consultation, if we follow them, it's not a referendum, would not be right, then it would be wrong of us to take that decision purely on the basis of consultation. We know, of course, on planning matters, we regularly have consultation on planning matters, for example, where a vast majority of the consultees are of one opinion, not just 2 or 3 to 1, but perhaps 10 or more to 1, but the committee takes a decision to the contrary, because that is the right thing to do in the circumstances.
Second supplementary, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Senior will not have difficulty to find that I agree very much with what he said about the nature of consultation. Would he agree with me that just occasionally, and that's not an issue just for this council, but indeed through the whole piece, it might be helpful to actually explain what consultation is about, because I think Councillor Carpenter does have a point that it can, when not properly explained, lead to a degree of cynicism there, but making clear that actually what consultation is asking people, have you got a better idea than we have? Not, this is a referendum on what we're proposing to do.
Councillor Senior.
I thank Councillor Grimston for his supplemental question. It is interesting. We've had a little bit of debate so far already about consultation, what it is and how we should do it. The Council's been carrying out consultation, well, for as long as I've been a councillor, for as long as it exists, and yet we still don't necessarily seem to have got it ideally right, and I think that depends on who you're talking to and perhaps in the change in people's perceptions and attitudes to authority. So yes, we do need to look at how we do these things and what we say, whether we could do more consultation by text messages, as the Health Service does quite effectively in some ways, but not in others, is one thing we need to look at. Or how we can improve our online consultation, how we can work with our Wandsworth panel to get results, how best to use the website. The only thing I would say is let's not make it too complicated, as that really is a way that we wouldn't get much response at all.
And Councillor Sweet.
Question 8 to the Cabinet Member.
I thank the Councillor for his question. Somewhat surprisingly, as the answer lays out, it's not all that easy to get a direct comparison with other London boroughs. I suspect in some ways that's because of the different ways in which housing stock is managed. But I would point out that this borough achieved the previous government's decent home standard early and on its own resources, when no less than £800 million had to be diverted by the Mayor from other funds to other councils which hadn't got anywhere near that level. And I would also point out that at the moment we have a further £70 million already in our capital programme for the ongoing capital schemes that we see on a month-by-month basis, and another £100 million for the estate regeneration, which we've been talking about so much tonight.
A supplementary question, Mr. Mayor. Can the Cabinet Member comment on the relationship between this Council's prudent management of its finances and its ability to manage the regeneration of the Winstanley and York Road estates?
Well, I hope they'll go one in one, and I hope the residents can have some confidence by the way in which we've managed, in particular, the capital programme over the years, that this scheme will work well. That we make sure that we have the money in place, we make sure that we have the works properly specified, and that we're able, by and large, to get them done roughly to time and according to timetable. It's interesting the leader mentioned earlier on, just after I came on the council, that particular series of decants. That was a very long time ago. But since then we have shown not only do we keep a regular capital programme going, but in other schemes as well, that we've done pretty effectively. If you can look at the developments, the most recent capital improvements that we've done in Latchmere Ward, of all places, very substantial improvements on what was not our best estate by any means, substantial improvements to the benefit of all the residents in the vicinity.
Is that your... Is there a second supplement?
Question 9 to the Cabinet Member.
I thank Councillor Carpenter for the question. As the answer sets out, it is difficult to give a precise answer because the lending rates will vary on a day-by-day basis, so we don't know exactly what would happen. However, I have been discussing this with the Director of Finance, and I certainly don't believe that we're making a loss on any of these borrowings.
Councillor Carpenter?
I'm sorry you made with such a cagey answer because it was actually intended as a friendly question. So let me phrase it another way. Is it not the case this is both a win-win situation for both the council and the schools in that at current public loan borrowing rates, the council will make a somewhat better return than it is on its bank balances, and the schools will be able to borrow at a somewhat lower rate than they will on the commercial markets?
In that case, yes, I certainly do agree with Councillor Carpenter.
Councillor Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank Councillor Mrs. Cooper for her question, and it actually highlights, even with the increases that we're bringing, or we're proposing to bring forward to get our residents up to target rents, the huge disparity out there of between sort of £42 and 300 and odd. They do represent, I think, very good value indeed, as the answer says. The social rents are around about 39% of the market rents. I think our tenants get a very good deal indeed. As for housing associations, it is very difficult to actually give an average rent for those because there are quite a number of them. But I think anecdotally, I think most people would say that housing associations are perhaps, rents are perhaps a little higher than council rents normally.
Councillor Cooper.
Does the Cabinet Member agree that the level of support available to tenants in relation to paying their rent is adequate?
I'd like to thank Councillor Mrs. Cooper for her supplementary. The vast majority of our tenants, of course, do not have difficulty with paying their rent. They're either in receipt of benefits or their own income is sufficient to pay it. As with probably with all landlords, there are a minority of tenants who have difficulty with budgeting or have financial problems. A number of measures are in place. I am regularly updated on the progress of those, and I am satisfied that our staff do the best they can to prevent tenants from getting into arrears in the first place by various interventions, signposting them to perhaps other benefits for which they may claim, or giving advice with budgeting. Where regrettably tenants do fall into arrears, then repayment programs are put into place to ensure that those arrears don't grow too much. So yes, I am indeed very happy with the arrangements we have at the moment.
Councillor Thomas.
Question number 11 to the Cabinet Member.
I'd like to thank Councillor Thomas for his question, and noting that he's also going to be speaking on housing later on, say how very much I welcome his renewed interest in housing, and perhaps this will mean that he will be rejoining the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee, who knows. I do hope so, if that's the case, because I did always value his constructive contribution to our debates. Looking at the figures that are in the answer here, at the moment roughly just over 1,000 of our tenants would be affected by either the social sector size criteria or the total benefit cap. Obviously, as I'm sure the Councillor will appreciate, this is a bit of a movable feast because people's financial circumstances change, their so the size of their households changes, so at any one time it can differ. But at the moment we're looking at around about 1,000 households would be affected, and that's probably around about 6% of our current tenanted stock.
Supplementary.
Indeed.
I thank the Councillor for his kind words. As I'm sure he'll appreciate, because these are a group actually on housing benefit, then the probability is that they are amongst some of the lowest income people within the borough. So any effect such as this has to be a cause for concern. In the light of his previous statement of confidence in the current arrangements, can I ask him what assessment he's made of the likely impact in terms of poverty, living standards, etc., of this particular change for that group? can he give us assurance that it's not going to be pushing people below the poverty line?
Councillor
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Thomas for his supplementary. I think it's always a bit of a hostage to fortune if you give your assurance for anything. So all I could say is that I would very much hope that the arrangements that we have in place will prevent the situation occurring that he fears. Certainly, when the various benefit reforms were brought in, a number of people were predicting huge increases in rent arrears and things like that. In fact, that has not been the case, certainly in Wandsworth, and I think it is because of the interventions that we have brought into place here. So, yes, I am hopeful that that will be the case, but of course we will always keep an eye on the situation.
Second supplementary, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Can the Cabinet member confirm that it is this Council's policy to automatically award discretionary housing payments to council tenants on a temporary basis affected by the benefit cap, where the household has rent in excess of an affordable rent threshold, and those tenants are seeking work? In other words, we are seeking to help tenants who are trying to help themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Mrs. Cooper for her supplementary. She is exactly correct in that our policy has been that the discretionary housing payment will not just be a sort of an automatic top-up of any other benefit. The tenants will be expected to either look for employment or make alternative arrangements. I think that has been particularly successful. Those councils that have chosen not to do that have suddenly found that they've now run out of discretionary housing payment, and so that means any new urgent cases that are coming forward cannot be helped. I think that's actually a rather foolish approach. I'm glad it's one that we did not adopt, and I'm sure Councillor Mrs. Cooper and indeed many of our other colleagues in the Chamber will be delighted to know that more and more of our tenants are actually finding work, and I think that's a very good thing.
Thank you, Councillor Brian.
Notwithstanding the very clear answer from the leader on a similar question earlier, could I put question 12, please, to the Cabinet member responsible?
I thank Councillor Bruin for his question. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to reiterate the leader's answer that the Battersea Sports Centre will remain open until Falcon Park is available, and also to highlight the growing number of excellent facilities there are. Keys House has been mentioned. There are others as well. It's already a rich landscape there, and I have to say that very, very positive vista is in such contrast to the party opposite's opportunistic negativity, which I do deplore. And so very, very pleased to be able to positively reiterate what the leader said.
Supplementary.
Councillor.
There has been a lot of misinformation on this subject, and if we can just focus on facts rather than some of the sort of emotive reactions. One of the issues which has been talked about a lot and is clearly of concern is there are a lot of sports groups which use the site as opposed to just individuals. Could the Cabinet member please just explain what work, if any, has been done in looking to ensure that these sports groups have somewhere to carry on their endeavour within the borough and close by?
Thank the Councillor for the supplementary question. Well, of course, there's going to be a huge net gain in facilities when all these plans are brought to fruition. But I absolutely accept that it can be unsettling. Change is unsettling. If you've got a very long-standing arrangement, either as an individual or perhaps particularly as a group, you've been doing something for years and years, this change will be unsettling. So we're already working very hard with groups to identify alternative options, and once this paper has been through committee, a point that Councillor Belton may like to note when he complains about consultation, once it has been through committee, we will redouble those efforts and do absolutely everything we can to make sure that facilities are re-provided to specific groups as closely as we possibly can do.
Yes, Councillor Speck.
Yeah. Question supplementary to the Cabinet member. It's really pleased to see what's happening with Falcon Park, but I did want to perhaps say a little bit more about the consultation side of it. That's obviously my ward, and I know both ends, because one end's a very long way from the other end. What I wanted to find out was that you've said about consultation with local residents. Is that the local residents around Falcon Park? Because it is a very completely different set of people. Is it the people around the sports centre as well? And is it, you've said a little bit just now, with the different users? Because it isn't just sports groups and footballers. You know, I mean, I can kick a football, but it's also lots of different groups of lots of different ages. And I agree that there's a lot happening, and Keys is wonderful and all the rest of it, but that is a youth facility. It hasn't got all the facilities. So can we make sure, A, there's a much wider consultation so that it's ready for what's going to be on the York Road site, the sports centre with the swim pool we're now going to have, but you know, really making sure we've got the right facilities in the right place.
I thank the Councillor for the second supplementary and its more positive tone. And we will, of course, consult as widely as we can. I mean, the focus for Falcon Park will be on Falcon Park itself, and that will follow the paper going through committee on the 10th of February. But I've heard everything she said about who she would like to have consulted.
Councillor Dawson.
I had at the back of my mind 13 was my lucky number tonight. My answer to the question is as on the order paper. It's going to be September 2017 before this wonderful development at Ronald Ross School is about to happen. And as yet, we're not quite sure when the Nine Elms development will be brought forward, but because of the speed of the development up there, it's about to be looked at again, because the places might be needed sooner, although there are other schools, of course, that are expanding in that area. So my answer is as is on the paper.
Supplementary, and thank the Cabinet Member for that response. Obviously a strong commitment to providing excellent education in all our sectors through a variety of different sort of channels. But in a particular case here, would you like to commend the head teacher and governors at Ronald Ross and Greenmead for the work and the support they are giving to the co-location of a mainstream primary and a special school on the same site, and the benefit that will accrue to the children at both schools?
I thank the member for the question. Several members in the chamber will know how excited I actually am about this project. It's taken quite a long time to get to fruition. I think the very first meeting I had with Councillor Belton when he joined the committee was on this particular subject. And it has been complicated because it is an expensive project. But to actually finally be able to deliver a school for youngsters with physical disabilities next door to an outstanding primary school, and to have those two heads really wanting to work together for the benefit of the pupils is terrific, and I'm very, very excited about it.
Can I assure the Cabinet Member of the Minority Party's full support? But could I also ask her to perhaps give lessons to some of her colleagues in keeping the Minority Party informed? You were good enough to brief me over quite a long time, almost about 3 hours over lunch. Very, very nice it was too. And perhaps the Deputy Leader could learn from this consultation and bear it in. Perhaps you need to give him lessons. Would you do so?
Councillor Belton this evening is ruining both the reputation of Councillor Govinda and myself. I think it has to be said that for those of us that have been in the chamber for a long time, some of the relationships are very different. I've always believed that we have the same goal as politicians, we just have a different way of getting there. I'm not sure some of the younger councillors see it in quite the same way as those of us that have dedicated a very long time to this borough see it.
Thank you, Councillor Tracy. Thank you, Councillors.